All right, the time being 7 o'clock, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Walnut Street RFP Neighborhood Meeting number 2. Just a couple little protocols. I'm Greg Spear. I'm chairman of the Foxborough Housing Authority, and I'll hand it over to Paige in just a minute. This is Kevin Powers over here. He is the vice chair. Just a little protocol. We're going to do our presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. When people have questions, we're going to ask you to come forward and sit in these chairs, and that way you can identify yourself, your name, and your street address, as well as this is our first hybrid meeting that we've had. So there's people that are calling in on Zoom. So the presentation will be on the screens, it'll be on Zoom, and that's sort of a little bit of our protocol. But I would ask for everybody's patience. If you do want to speak, there'll be ample time at the end of the meeting to ask questions. And we have our consultant here, but I'm going to turn it over to Paige Duncan, our town planner, and she'll do the rest of the introductions, and then we'll start our presentation.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm Paige Duncan. I'm the planning director here in Foxborough. Have with me Gabby Jordan. She's a staff planner, also a resident. And then Emily will introduce herself, but she's our consultant. I did want to also mention for Greg's benefit and Kevin's that we have another member of the Housing Authority on Zoom, and that's Bethany. I don't think there's anybody else from the Housing Authority, but we do have, I don't know if that represents a majority or not, but you do have 3 members here.
Yep, there's 3 members. Great.
So just so you know, this is a posted meeting of the Housing Authority. So for those of you who weren't at the first meeting, Emily's going to give us a good sort of roundup, so I don't want to cover that again. But just to give some context and background, this project has been going on long before I got here. The Housing Authority got involved when the land was given to them. And you've probably seen a newspaper article recently about the $2 million that Congressman Auchincloss has assisted us with, or is assisting us with. Just to give some context on those numbers, when we first got involved in this project, it was limited to 90 beds, and that was based on Title V. So at a certain point, we were able to look at sewer, and there's an ability to run sewer from Central Street down the other side of Walnut Street, across 140, and then up to this site. At 90 beds, there's really no development potential. Like, you're not going to be able to get anybody to build any affordable housing. So that was really not viable. The up to 250 came from really us trying to create enough of a number to meet the need. We do have some updated needs here. Actually, Maggie was kind enough to provide these to, but there are 2,678 elderly/non-elderly applicants on the state waiting list for housing authorities. 142 are Foxborough residents, 101 are elderly, and 41 are non-elderly disabled. So we've been talking about housing for a while, and the one way to get some grants was to talk about greater number, and that's where we sort of came up to. We don't know if it's going to be 250, and that Emily will get into that, but just to caution, we don't have a project, we don't have a developer. What we have is a piece of land, and that's where we're starting out. So we'd say up to 250, but we don't yet know that number, but that was enough to get us. We've got the Housing Choice Grant, which was $247,000. 200,000 of that designed the signal at Walnut Street, believe it or not, which is a state highway, not a town road. And then the other 47 designed the sewer extension. So the state has paid for all of that so far. And now we are in line to get a grant for the Walnut Street signal. As you heard, Congressman Auchincloss has put in federal money, but we've also applied at the state. And we think that with the leveraging of the $2 million from the feds to offset that, we think the state will have really no choice. I mean, they'll have a choice, obviously, but we hope that they'll see that this money can leverage their money and fix a state highway that is theirs, actually. So that's just a little context. I know we got a few calls about the number. That number is not set in stone. We don't know the number. Honestly, it's subject to local approval. This project has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for approval. So that's when the number will be decided. But we did have to pick a number, and it had to be sufficient enough to warrant investment by the state to look at this project. So that's a little context and a little long-winded, but Emily, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Paige. My name is Emily Ennis from Ennis Associates. I'm the consultant working with the town on preparing the RFP. We had an earlier meeting and we covered some of the same expectations that we're going to cover tonight. So again, we're discussing the creation of a request for proposals tonight. And what this does is it allows the Foxborough Housing Authority to go out to developers and say, as Paige said, we have some land, we'd like to use the land for affordable housing. These are the criteria that we're setting in place for the use of the land. Come back to us and tell us what you, the developers, propose to do with it. And then the Foxborough Housing Authority has the opportunity to choose a preferred developer and work with them. So when Paige says we don't know what the project is, it's because we're at the very beginning stages of the process. Even this being the second meeting is still very much at the beginning stages of the process. So you don't always do community meetings when you're coming up with an RFP. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. The Foxborough Housing Authority really wanted to make sure that there was community input into the criteria for both the development conditions and also for the evaluation criteria of which developer would be chosen. So that's why we're doing, originally it was just going to be one meeting. There were enough questions and we wanted to come back and show how we heard what had been said at the meeting. So we decided to go ahead and have a second one. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what we talked about on May 26th, the first meeting, and then we're going to talk about what we heard and how that's been developed into the draft RFP. It's important for you all to know that it's still a draft RFP. We wanted to have this meeting tonight, hear any other concerns and questions, and then we would be finalizing the RFP. And then I'll talk a little bit about the timeline of the process after the RFP is issued and what that means so that you're all sort of on the same page about where this goes. And for those of you on Zoom that I can't see, please, as we go through the presentation, use the Q&A function to talk about what questions that you have, and then we'll alternate questions from people in the room here up at the table and questions from Zoom when we get to that period. So again, this isn't a meeting about a development project because we don't have a development project yet. So we don't know the number of units. We don't know the mix of units, although we'll be talking about that tonight. Whether it's going to be one building or multiple buildings, how much parking, how much traffic, how many residents, or one of the other questions we had was the location of the entry and the exit into the site. All of that would come through the RFP process. The developers will be required to give conceptual plans and elevations as part of their proposal so that the FHA can see those concepts as part of their evaluation process. And again, this is our second meeting. So on May 26th, we had a completely virtual meeting. One of the reasons for waiting till July for the second meeting is so we could have it at least hybrid. So it's good to see actual 3D faces tonight. Just to familiarize everybody with the site, you can see that the working on Paige's computer tonight. So you can see the site in the middle there. You've got Route 140 and obviously the I-95 exit and entrance there. We do have an abutting residential neighborhood, the North High Street neighborhood, and then a couple more houses on the Walnut Street side. If I pull out, you can see a little bit more. There's some conservation land, which on Mass GIS, which is the Geographic Information System, is listed as protected in perpetuity on both sides of 140. We've also got about half-mile away. There's some medical office along Walnut, and there's shopping another half-mile away. Now, one of the things is, although half-mile is walking distance, it is not sidewalked there. So the idea that seniors might be living here and walking to these different places that might otherwise be attractive, obviously without sidewalks, that can't happen. Paige had mentioned the intersection improvements. There's a small amount of sidewalk that would be included in the intersection improvements, but just again, giving you a picture of the context. Paige also mentioned that this project has actually been discussed for quite some time. So starting back in 1989, this was originally owned by the Massachusetts Department of Mental Retardation, eventually by the state's Division of Capital Asset Management. It was thought of as a children's museum way back in '89, and that was not something that was thought of well at the time because the site is zoned residential. In '92, the state started the disposition process, so this idea that it didn't want the land anymore. And so there was apparently at one point the idea of a retail shopping complex in '93. Residential uses were something that were preferred then. In 2007 again. DCAM in 2010 really got serious and declared the property as surplus. The FHA expressed its interest. The Bay Colony Group did a feasibility study, which will be on the website for this, this RFP. And there was progress made in 2013, 2015, and finally in 2016 by an act of the legislature, this property was transferred to the FHA. And it was transferred with some conditions, and the main condition is that it be used for affordable housing. If the site is not used for affordable housing, it reverts back to DCAM. And so as we look at the disposition requirements, you can see it up on here. If it reverts back to DCAM, obviously they would then own it and have control over what use went on the site. Another part of the things that we delved into at the beginning of this year's process was what are the needs for affordable housing in Foxborough, and there is a high need for affordable housing for seniors. We talked in May about whether or not it should be senior plus family because there is also a need for family housing, but after listening to the voices that were in the room in May and understanding a little bit more about the history of how the site has been discussed over the years. The FHA made the decision that this is just going to be affordable housing for the elderly. It's not going to be family affordable housing, and that's because all along it was discussed as affordable housing for the elderly. The family was something we wanted to think about and talk about because we had the opportunity, but really it had always been talked about. So it is now, when we talk about the criteria, it is now just affordable housing for the elderly. So you can see that in the bullet points here, seniors in Foxborough have increased from 12% of the population in 2010. They are 17% of the population now, and in 2030, they're expected to be 23% of the population. 58% of households in Foxborough are just 1 to 2 people, and household size is continuing to decline. The town's been working on a draft housing production plan, which is where these statistics came from. And although Foxborough is very income diverse, seniors and renters are much more likely to be low income. And then again, thus the need as the senior population is increasing, they're more likely to be low income. The need for affordable housing in the actual units that Paige called out is pretty clear. When you look at income and affordability limits, we went into great detail on this in May and talked about the actual income limits. Those are on that presentation. I believe that's on the website for people to look. If not, we can make sure that it is. But just for the purposes of today's presentation, 7% of elderly family households are extremely low income, 12% very low income, and 14% low income. So again, there's a huge need in this community. Paige mentioned the signalization and the sewer expansion projects. Both of those are dependent on the affordable housing being built at the site. So it's important to note that the sewer doesn't just address sewer on this site, it addresses other properties along that route. In terms of the signalization, without this project happening, without affordable housing on the site, Mass Highway has indicated that it would consider using barriers along Route 140 to divide Commercial Street. And so I haven't seen plans that show that, but my understanding is that that could, if that choice were made, that could prevent turns into Walnut Street from coming off 95 from 140. So just to know that. Now, we heard a lot of comments on May 26. One of them, of course, was a concern about family units versus senior only. And as I said, the FHA made the decision that these will be senior only units. We had somebody express a desire for more sidewalks. There was deep concern about the fact that this was a wooded lot, that wildlife was used to using it, that of course the existing houses had a certain amount of privacy already and views of the trees. So thinking about buffers, extensive wooded buffers for privacy. Some people wanted fences and walls, some people didn't. We thought we'd leave that choice up to the developer to propose to see how it would look. Concerns about privacy and security for both existing and future residents. And in particular, we had a meeting of town staff that were involved in looking at development proposals and said, what are your concerns? This happened before the May 26th meeting, and we talked about it there. And one concern that had been brought up at the town staff level is that with these units so close to easy on and off from I-95, that there was a possibility of crime coming from I-95. So we discussed how to address those security concerns. Again, some questions and desires for a major wooded buffer. And we talked about in May, not just a wooded buffer from the houses on North High Street to whatever development, but also people are used to driving down Walnut Street and seeing trees as they drive down. So could there be a wooded buffer between Walnut Street and the development as well? So that view shed would be protected. View shed being one of those planning terms for you stand at a certain point and look forward, and that's a view shed. It's a view from one particular spot to something else. And then a final concern that we heard in May is something that I think is very apparent from all of you being here tonight, which is a desire for more community meetings on this project. Again, we're here at the RFP stage now, assuming that a developer responds, or one or more developers respond to this RFP and the FHA is happy with one of them, there'd be a whole host of a design process after that, a permitting process after that, and there was a desire to have community meetings during that. So again, those weren't all the concerns. We did have concerns about traffic, scale of the buildings. Those were very development specific, and without the proposals from the developers, it's not something we can answer at this point. But we'll talk a little bit about how some of those concerns can be addressed during the RFP process. So our next step was to start putting together a draft, and there's two places where this community input, whatever you say to us tonight, can also come in. One is the development conditions. So those are the conditions under which we're asking the developers to say, if you develop this type of building or style of building, or if you do something to the site, these are development conditions. They're things that govern how the buildings and the landscaping and the parking all fit onto the site. The second piece is the evaluation criteria. So we've set it up so there's a less advantageous, advantageous, and highly advantageous. And what that does is we're able to put things in and say, if you meet this level, it's less advantageous. You're not really going to where you want to be. You're just probably at the minimum. If you're at advantageous, this is where we want to be, but you're just you're getting your B+ here. Highly advantageous is A. This is really going to set you apart from the other proposals. And so some of what we heard as community concerns are in those evaluation criteria, where others are in the development conditions. So the first one is addressing the concern about family and senior only. And so the condition, they must meet this as a minimum condition, 100% of the units will be restricted to persons 60 years of age or older and persons who are non-elderly disabled. They're going to be rental, 100% of the units will be rental units at a variety of affordability levels. Now, this is important. The FHA is very concerned about making sure that there's a variety of levels for people of different incomes to be able to be in this project, once it's finally built. But we're not, at this point, we're not defining exactly which is which. So there are a couple of different funding sources out there for projects like this. They have their own criteria for the mix. What we're saying is the better you can do in terms of showing a variety of affordability levels, that starts to become a highly advantageous. So you'll see on the right-hand side the draft evaluation criteria. The left is the development conditions. So you're highly advantageous if you're exceeding the minimum criteria for MHP, that's Mass Housing Partnership Finance projects. You're advantageous if you're just meeting the minimum criteria for MHP, or DHCD, which is the Department of Housing and Community Development. Both of those are funding sources and approval sources. So again, we're setting the minimum, and then we're setting you're getting an A as you move forward. And then finally, there's a real issue for people who are aging in place to be able to age in place safely without having to leave once they get settled because they've become disabled or because they're less able to function. So in looking at the principles, there's a design format called universal design, where housing units, whether rental or ownership, whether apartments, a condo, or single family, are designed to principles that anybody can be, everything is accessible. And you might see this, so for example, if somebody's had an accident, right, they've broken their leg or they've hurt their hand or, they're less mobile, a housing unit that's designed to universal principles means that anybody at any age who is disabled, whether temporarily or permanently, would be able to stay in their home. So you'll see wider doorways to allow for wheelchairs. You'll see lever handles to be able to push down rather than having to turn, which is much more difficult as you age or if you're disabled. So we'd like all of the units to be designed to those principles. And then at the moment, we're looking at 50% that would be fully wheelchair accessible. Again, as we continue our conversations, that may change. So those are ways that we're thinking about how do we make these units, again, elderly only, but also suitably designed for the elderly. So the next thing we heard was the wooded buffer, thinking about wildlife, thinking about protection from light and sound for the people who live in the current neighborhood, thinking about privacy issues, both for existing residents and future residents. So in terms of development conditions, they have to propose a significant natural buffer between the existing neighborhood on North High Street and the new development, and a preservation of a tree buffer along Walnut Street. We're also asking them to provide energy-efficient lighting compliant with dark sky standards, and what that does is it reduces overspill, so you don't have light shooting up into the sky and causing glare, and it also reduces overspill. The wooded buffer would generally keep it from spilling onto adjacent properties, but it would go sort of that next step to make sure that that doesn't happen. So that's the conditions. They have to meet those. In terms of advantageous and highly advantageous, for the thick buffer between the houses and the development, it has to be thick. It can't just be significant. We want a good solid buffer. In terms of highly advantageous, we'd also like a tree maintenance plan to address aging and diseased trees. It's not enough to just have a buffer and then the trees fall down and or there's a diseased tree that might be threatening a property over time. We want them to understand that they still have a requirement to maintain that, and that maintenance plan could be taking down something that's dangerous and planting something in its place. So in terms of landscape design, which is where the outdoor lighting would come in, advantageous is that it's an integrated approach to landscape design, management for ongoing care and maintenance, so that it would continue to look good, but that also the design includes thinking about utilities, thinking about stormwater management, so all the stormwater is managed on the site and it's not flowing off-site onto adjacent properties or into the street. Thinking in terms of the people who will be living there, gathering spaces, passive and active recreation. So that could be a gazebo, it could be community gardens for the residents, something like that being integrated into the site. Highly advantageous is we want them to be imaginative about that. We want the quality of the design to really step up a notch or two from the basic. As you can probably imagine, less advantageous are people who just sort of meet the very base minimum requirements, which does include stormwater management. That's actually a town requirement for construction, that it be managed on site. So this particular slide covers three things that we heard: desire for sidewalks, concerns about security, and meetings with the community. You'll see that in terms of development conditions versus evaluation criteria for the sidewalk and concerns about security, these are basic development conditions that they have to meet. So there's not an additional evaluation criteria. So they have to connect to the sidewalk that's proposed as part of the MassDOT signalization project. We can't have a sidewalk come close to the site, and people who live at the site can't access that sidewalk. So that's just a base condition. And security cameras, that was something mentioned by the chief of police when we had that, talking with town staff, so that any safety concerns based on the proximity to I-95. Now, as you can imagine with security cameras, there's a balance of personal privacy for residents versus safety, so we would expect there to be some sort of management plan on the security cameras. And then in terms of meetings with the community, we are requiring that they have meetings with the community during both the pre-permitting process. So as Paige mentioned, they would be going to ZBA for approval, and ZBA will have its own public process. But before going to ZBA, we're asking that they meet, or requiring that they meet with neighbors, and then also during the construction process. So pre-permitting, ZBA has its own requirements for public engagement and involvement. And then post-ZBA, we're assuming for the purposes of the proposal, this goes all the way through, that they can't just say, we got our permit, we don't need to talk to the neighbors anymore. They have to meet with the neighbors during the construction process. And so advantageous is 1 to 2 meetings with the community prior to application to the ZBA, 1 to 2 meetings during the construction process. Highly advantageous is more than that. We want you to come with more, but that there's an ongoing outreach process to monitor and respond to concerns. So I know of some developers that have set up websites where people can log things. Others have had regular meetings. So whatever that is, we want them to propose that, and that becomes highly advantageous. And then in terms of other considerations, so that covered the major considerations that came from the May 26th meeting. In terms of other considerations, we wanted to think about the quality of life for the residents, for the senior residents on the site. So 24/7 on-site management, which in fact is actually good for the rest of the community as well, because they know who to call if there's an issue, but extremely important for the seniors. Units need to be designed for residents with mobility and accessibility challenges. We talked about that already. Recreational amenities for the residents, and we talked a little bit about that in terms of the landscape design, but would also include an interior community room as well as exterior space. Room for a social worker to meet privately with residents who need assistance. Often these rooms might be a little small and people might not feel comfortable welcoming a social worker into their own place, so making sure that there's a private space to have needed conversations. A community room with a hardwired generator, so that in cases of power outages or if there's a need for cooling or heating as we get our hotter weather or as we have storms, that there's a place where people can gather, charge their phones, be together. And then a mail and package room. And again, these are basic requirements. They have to meet those. We also wanted to talk about additional town requests in both the development conditions and the evaluation criteria. So again, we can't talk about what the buildings look like yet because we don't know what's proposed, but we do want to make sure that the architectural design is reflective of a New England town, including traditional materials. So those would be clapboards, brick, stone, and that they think about the aesthetics of the adjacent neighborhoods and of the town as a whole as they come forward. So we're looking for high quality architectural design. At a minimum, compliance with the stretch energy code. So although we know Foxborough doesn't have a stretch energy code, we're asking that they comply with it. That has a couple of benefits, including to the residents, because it means utility bills will be a lot lower for them. And then again, as a basic requirement, stormwater must be retained and managed on site, so it can't spill over. In terms of energy efficiency and architectural design, we also have an advantageous and highly advantageous. In terms of energy efficiency, we'd like them to be that they could qualify for LEED rating or passive house or net zero. These are all energy rating scales. It can be very expensive to actually qualify for them because there's a lot of paperwork involved. So advantageous is that you could, but you're not choosing to get the certification. Highly advantageous is that you're actually getting the certification. In terms of architectural design, we want advantageous is that you're meeting the minimum requirements, but you're also designing so that it's balancing private needs with public spaces, easy maintenance of both common and private areas. So again, thinking about that quality of life for somebody living there, reducing operating costs and providing a safe environment for the people who live there. Highly advantageous as you're taking that next step in terms of design and integration and really making sure that the architectural design has buildings that relate to each other but are also sympathetic to the context of the neighboring community. So that's highly advantageous. And then finally, the revised timeline. We had suggested a timeline in May, and going back and looking at the different steps the developer is going to have to take post-RFP. We've expanded that schedule out a little bit, just because we could see when we were going to, we being the FHA, were going to issue the RFP, where it was falling in terms of when people were going to respond. So this RFP will be finalized at the end of the month. This is, again, the last stage of the community process. We'll take everything that we hear tonight. We've actually got a meeting tomorrow morning to talk about what we've heard, and then I'll be finalizing the draft for the FHA. We anticipate that the RFP would actually be issued in September rather than August to make sure that it gets enough attention from the development community. There'll be a site walk in October for developers to see the property and see the area. Proposals will be due in November. And then that evaluation process will start taking place in December, interviews in January. We anticipate that a developer would be, assuming that we have, enough proposals that meet all the criteria, would be selected in March. Contract probably signed in April. There's usually a period of going back and forth. And so the developer would be beginning their design process in May. So there's a lot of time between now and even the real design starting. And the RFP does require that they show us conceptual plans and elevations and sketches of what they're proposing to do. But the actual design probably wouldn't start till May of next year. So once that design is done, that would be part of that pre-permitting process where we would expect that there would be community meetings. And so it would take a little while before it actually got to the ZBA, and that I don't have a timeline for. And with that, I think you've heard from me enough. We'd be delighted to have questions from you all here, and obviously for those on Zoom, we can alternate back and forth. And again, so that the people on Zoom can hear you, if you want to come up and just identify yourselves in front of the mic. Unfortunately, they won't be able to hear you from where you're sitting. So that's one of the things of a hybrid meeting. So thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to your questions.
Go ahead, John. Do you want to come up, please?
It's a multi-part question.
That's it.
Okay. I'm sure that you all saw my letter to the editor.
State your name.
John Gray, 52 North High Street.
Yep.
I wrote a letter to the editor, and my premise was zoning. And in it, I asked how the Housing Authority could, in good conscience, sidestep zoning. There's a number of people in this room that have recently bought houses, and they've, I'm sure, looked at a map and they said it's R40. Best you can do is you can put single-family houses there. And I had a conversation with you, and you said it was a strategy to do a friendly 40B into this proposal so that you could basically erase zoning. And I would like it if you could explain to the neighborhood how that can happen in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I'll be glad to take that question. My background for people, I'm a real estate builder and developer. I was president of the Home Builders of Massachusetts, and I'm very familiar with the 40B statute. And basically, 40B was put in place for exactly the reason of what's going on with the neighborhood today, is that there's a huge housing crisis going on in Massachusetts, that there's just not enough housing being developed under typical zoning requirements. And 40B was put in place I want to say in like 1970, was it? How long is it? It's since the 70s to basically circumvent local zoning for specifically trying to have additional housing be developed. The governor, I just heard on the news today, saying that, housing is one of the biggest issues with the Commonwealth right now, retaining a viable workforce because people are getting priced out of the housing part of it. So 40B was put in place not by our housing authority, but by the state voted to adopt 40B. And there's been units in Foxborough that have been developed under the 40B. There's been 2 larger developments, and there's a smaller one just got proposed. And basically, it's a way to circumvent local zoning to try to get more density on a site than 1 house per acre. So that is been in place. One of the items that they put, in a proposal is this isn't, we've been working on this project since 2007. John, to try to get this property. And, the Foxborough Housing Authority, we don't do single families. Matter of fact, we can't even, under the new statute, we can't even develop the property. We have to go through a developer. So it's the same, process for the other, Foxborough Housing Authority has Centennial Court. We have several other complexes here in town. So this thing has been in the works since 2010. Is when we initially found out about it, and the Housing Authority expressed interest in 2011, and we had a plan, a feasibility study was done in 2013. So this isn't blindsided,
No, you're drifting off the question.
So the question is 40B is a way to circumvent local zoning.
Right.
Or specifically to add density to a
Right.
site.
Now, I sat in on a Zoom meeting back in the early part of May, maybe late April, where a comment was made. They fully understand that this zoning bylaw was put into place by a 2/3 vote of town meeting. And the comment was that you're not going to get a 2/3 vote to change the zoning into low-income housing. And this is a strategy to erase local zoning to build this project, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
So-
Now, the thing is, so I can go and spread the word that if you happen to be living next to an R40 parcel, it's not safe. You can never depend on zoning in Foxborough anymore.
So here's the thing, John, is Foxborough has met their 10% affordable housing requirement under 40B.
Correct.
So this is a friendly 40B that we're going in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the Zoning Board of Appeals has every right to turn us down. And then the property then reverts back to DCAM, and you could have a prison there.
No,
You
but
could-
but it's
you could
still
have-
R40.
It still is R40, but the state circumvents all zoning, as well as educational, circumvent zoning. So you could have a group home. You could have all sorts of uses that circumvent zoning because they're either government-owned or they're school-related. So this is one of these times where what we're proposing, we're asking for input from people, but we definitely are circumventing local zoning. But there will not, if this goes back to the state, it's not going to be single-family homes. It's not going to be. They're going to find another use for it. It could be just like what they have up the street, where you have the sand and salt facility. There's all sorts of uses can be put on that circumvent zoning. So just because it's a 40, because it's an R40 zone, the state and everybody can circumvent zoning. And when it goes back to DCAM, they can do with it what they want.
Okay, second question. Currently, this property is owned by the Foxborough Housing Authority.
That is correct.
You're going to turn this over to a developer who may or may not be the final landlord, but someone is going to be the landlord in collecting rents. My question is, given that, and you told me this, given that the property is always going to be owned by the Foxborough Housing Authority, can you talk about how this will be taxed, if at all?
So first of all, the land will be owned by Foxborough Housing Authority with a long-term lease to the developer. So that is, and as far as the tax, that's all part of how the developer decides how they're going to do the tax work with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I can't tell you,
Property taxes.
property tax, I cannot tell you how that is going to be handled at this time. Do you know?
I think we have to wait. So just so you all know, part of the proposal that's received will include a pro forma and will include financial information. And so, again, we don't know the specifics because we don't have the proposals. And I do recognize it's frustrating coming to a meeting and being told we don't know this, we don't know that, but that's how the RFP process
No,
works.
my question is, this is still going to be a publicly owned piece of land, which isn't taxable, but people are going to be living on it. So if they're getting fire and police service, are they going to be paying for it? If not, we're all paying for it. I'm looking for an answer.
That's correct. That basically, just with all the FHA properties, we don't pay taxes.
Right.
We're tax exempt. And that's why,
Got to be people living in our neighborhood, not paying taxes, and we have to subsidize that. With all local services, we're gonna be paying more per capita for these services, and these people are gonna get a free ride.
that's, if you want to look at it that way, John, I'm not disagreeing.
Okay.
All right?
Okay, next question is sewer.
Yes.
There are a lot of people in town who have been in town for a long time, have supported the sewer project, and it seems like if you're from, another project like this gets first preference. Why don't we get first preference? We've been here forever. And all of a sudden, the state is bending over backwards to find a way to get sewer to this project, when, why aren't you sending that capacity to the people who live in town?
Well, that's really a question for the Water and Sewer Board, but I will share with you, the sewer line extension is coming down Central. It crosses Central Street and comes down Walnut Street, and there's a bunch of facilities, commercial facilities, that are looking to connect to the sewer through that ability. So you basically have the shopping center, I call it the
Bradley's
Bradley
Plaza.
Shopping Center, that would tie into the back. There's also NORCAP that's there, Stewart Hospital. The Housing Authority owns a parcel on the other side of Walnut Street as well. So this is servicing major commercial buildings that will be, the sewer line will be brought across. I can't tell you whether that sewer line can be extended to the residential areas where you are.
Again, my point is, if you get a low-income housing, the world jumps through hoops to service these people, but nobody jumps through hoops to take care of the people that actually live there.
I would say that is a question you need to ask the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners.
I will.
So that, which is fine. You were selectmen, you know how this all works. So we've been working with the other users to make sure that they are interested, and that's why we've actually secured the sewer capacity. And there's room recently for the sewer to be expanded. So there's other parts of town where people have connected, in the critical needs area. I think there's a critical needs area for the sewer, capacity, but that's really a question for them. We're just looking at what we would need to do to bring sewer to the site to be able to build up the density, because the 90 bedrooms would not make this a viable site.
Last question, what's the
May
definition?
may I interrupt for a second? I just want to clarify, because we have Claire O'Neill here from Mass Development, and she just did write a note that the ground lease in Belchertown for assisted living does pay taxes, so we don't know if that will be the same way, but again, this might be something, it's a good comment, that when we write our RFP, we can try, we've already been looking at the lease and what the terms are going to be, but we can certainly look at whether it's taxes or payment in lieu of. I can't read. So it's, so they do pay local property taxes. So this is something we can look at and look at.
Well, the reason I had that question teed up is because you were going to have some family units with kids that was, the last time I talked with you, that was part of your plan. Now that's changed.
That's changed, yes.
But you were going to be sending kids to our public schools, and no one's paying any taxes. So that's why I need clarification on it.
So I think, as I said, we don't have that specific answer, but that could be part of our RFP, that they do have to pay real estate taxes as part of their lease payment to FHA. So that's all part of the negotiations as we move forward. And the second thing that is a big comment for people in this room, we heard you when you said you didn't want family housing units. We then spoke to the police chief and the fire chief, and they concurred that a lot of the issues they have with the other 40B properties in town is directly related to the family units, which, both the fire chief, and the police chief had horror stories, to be truthful with you. We weren't aware of that. We took the information from our first meeting back in May with you people, and we, heard you. And that's a big thing. There was a lot of interest in family housing, but then, we just got these numbers from Maggie, who's our head of our housing authority, our administrative, that, right now, there's 142 people on a waiting list. Some of those people are on the waiting list for a long time. So we see a huge need for elderly housing, and the other big need right now is the non-elderly disabled. That's a huge component of what we deal with right now, and we don't have...
That's my next question.
We do not have, the Housing Authority currently, I think we have 3 handicap units out of all our 2. So this is a big deal for us to be able to have handicap units as well as the universal adaptable designs, which means that people don't have to get into bathtubs. The doorways are 3 feet open, So, we're trying to incorporate the universal adaptable design for all of our units, but specifically, we're asking for 50% to be, handicap accessible. So it's a huge need. So, and, something, you live in a community, and these are the people, because we've met our 40B, we can give local preference to Foxborough people. In other words, the state list is open to 2,600 people that are on it.
That wasn't what she read off.
What was that?
She read off that Foxborough residents was only going to be about half.
No, what?
No, I was just talking, I'm sorry. I hadn't actually mentioned the local preference at all. I was just reading the statistics from the housing plan of who's here now. I didn't actually mention the local preference. I can go back to the slide.
So I think the
Tighten
local,
that up, because people think that we're going to get out of towners living behind us.
well, I think the first, and this is where it gets a little dicey, is we can restrict it the first time around when we rent it, that I think it's 70%.
70% max, yeah.
We can have local preference. Once those units turn over, we can't have that local preference. We're part of the state list. So that's something that's written into it. So initially, and we have a lot of long-term residents. Maggie, what would you say our long-term, what's your average, just,
I think the last person that moved out had been there for 35 years.
So, a lot of our residents are long-term residents, and with the being able to have it 70% local, you're addressing a need that is a local Foxborough need.
Okay, last question is, what's your
You said
definition?
that before.
What's your definition of disabled?
That's a good question, Maggie. Do you have exactly, I wouldn't,
The reason I
It's
asked
a
that.
state definition.
It's a
not
state
local.
I want to
definition.
know what's going in this RFP, because of the definition of disabled is drug addicts, released felons, migrants. They could all be disabled in some respect.
They
But
can't be, John, but
you've seen housing developments in other towns, 15 years out, they are like totally populated with drug addicts.
John, it defers back to what the state requirements are. We can't, as a housing authority, it's a federal definition of.
What is it?
It's specific, Emily, I don't think we need to get into that tonight.
I don't have it in front of me anyway.
So, but
we
it's
can
specific,
check.
John. We're not writing it, and you
Okay.
could be absolutely right. If being disabled is being an alcoholic or a drug addict, I can't answer that right now. But we have to go by whatever the state and federal requirements are for that. Otherwise, we're discriminating.
Can you find that out before the next meeting?
I can absolutely find that out before the next
thanks.
meeting.
I'll yield, thanks.
Are you going to do a Zoom?
Sorry?
Are you going
wanna
to
do a
do a Zoom?
Zoom?
Do we have a Zoom question? Thank
No,
you.
I don't have any Zoom questions.
Okay. Steve Harding, 14 North High Street.
Yep.
My question is, this is going to be affordable for the seniors. Now, if a Foxborough resident sells their home, is that going to bump them out of qualification?
It depends, Steve. There's a very specific criteria which we can get on what the, in other words, it has to do with your income, and it also has to do with how much money you have in the bank. So if an elderly person sells their house and has a fair amount of equity in their house, they're probably not going to be eligible to be able to move into this development. So there's a very specific criteria which we can absolutely get to you, but it's not our criteria. This is a state specific, and it has to do with how much money you have in the bank.
Yeah, I just would like to know.
So we can get you that, but it's kind of out of our hands. We have made it very specific for the criteria as far as the most needy, the
Right.
needy. And the other thing that also bumps people to the top of the list is the veteran disabled. That kind of goes to the top of the list. That's what we have to deal with today.
Sure.
So, but that is done by the state.
But if I
That's-
may add, we have talked, Steve, about, and that's why I think there's some flexibility. We're not trying to prescribe what they do, because we have talked about, a lot of times when we think of affordable housing, it's, 80% of the area median income. And that disqualifies a lot of people. Since we're talking about, we don't know how many units, we've also talked about going up higher than that, to 100% of AMI or even 120. We don't know what that means. We don't know enough about it, but then that way maybe it wouldn't exclude as many people. But we do want to make sure this, housing authority projects are typically for those who don't have assets, who don't necessarily, can't afford market rate, and they need this subsidy that's being discussed. And those are the folks that typically don't have assets.
The problem, when we talked about this in May, is that area median income is based on the Boston metro region.
Oh, it's not just local?
Yeah, it's not just local. And so that puts a lot of people in a situation where they may genuinely not be able to afford something, but the numbers don't line up because it's based on Boston. So that's why we're trying to be flexible and say, look, we want to be able to help the maximum number of people in terms of the range of affordability, and leaving that up to the developer to propose. And then how they come back with that flexibility goes into the evaluation criteria.
Okay. So, speaking about the RFP, is it possible to put in the RFP like a scale that says 65% for elderly, 35% for disabled, anything like that possible?
Isn't that mandated by the state? Like, Maggie, isn't it, like,
There was a
you're
percentage by the
required to have X amount of non-elderly disabled?
Right now, the state requirement is 14.5%
Yes.
of your units have to be for non-elderly disabled. So the number varies depending on which town you're in and how many units you have in the housing authority.
So could that be something put in the RFP, or is it just, like, who decides that after it's up and running?
That's a state regulation.
That's a state regulation. A lot of this is state-related.
But the state, I'm sure, doesn't maximize it at 14%, do they? They say that's a minimum. Do they have a maximum?
No, we're required to have 14.5% of our units have to go to non-elderly disabled. That comes out to 18 or 19 units. For us, we only have 104 elderly units. So once we have, excuse me, those 18 and 19, we don't house any more
Oh, okay.
non-elderly disabled.
So that is a cap number then?
Yes, it is.
That's not a minimum, that's a cap.
We're supposed to meet it
Okay.
at all times.
And just to clarify, Maggie, that's across all of the units that the FHA has, not just one specific property.
Total elderly units.
Total elderly units, okay, thank
So
you.
that might be something that the housing authority has to consider, because if these units are, a lot of the units we have in town are not handicapped. You said there's only two.
Actually, there's only one fully handicapped unit, and I say that, there's only one that has a roll-in shower out of 104 units.
Okay. So the thing, it could naturally happen that the people that are, physically challenged almost end up in those units at a disproportionate rate just because there aren't any. So as a system, that might be something the housing authority needs to look at, as to whether, you do want to max it out, or whether it has to do with the type of disability. I don't know how that works. Again, it's all very state regulated, but I see where you're saying is you don't want to top load that
Right.
side of town with
We'd just like
that.
to know what's coming down the road.
Right,
Of
right.
course, yeah.
But it
And-
could happen because it is disabled.
Okay.
So.
And so say we poo-poo everything and we kick it back to the state. What's the odds that this land stays empty?
Steve, I don't have a crystal ball. I
But
wish I
it seems
did.
like the state's been trying to get rid of this for almost 30 years.
Well, they've been trying to, but things have been changing, and I will share with you, I know the governor on a first-name basis, and housing's a huge proponent right now
And
in the
at the
state,
federal level,
because
too.
people are leaving the state because they can't get housing. So I would say here's a chance that you could have a group home there. There's other uses for that land, and especially with the potential having sewer and a signal, it's going to get developed,
Right,
one
but-
way or the other, and it's not going to be for single-family homes.
So in the grand scope of things, this might be the best use of this property as far as the neighborhood's concerned. I don't know how y'all feel, but.
Well, and honestly, we're trying to listen to what you have to say from a neighborhood, and we get, some of your concerns, but when we switched over to all elderly, that's a huge component here. that makes a big difference, and there's a huge need for elderly housing in this community. I get calls all the time. Maggie does too. You know, people think we can, you know, just because we're on the housing authority, I can boost them to the list. It doesn't work that way. You know, we have, you know, 2 main complexes and a bunch of scattered sites, and we scramble trying to meet the need, and the need far exceeds, you know, what we have. We have emergency, you know, orders that come through, so we're challenged. And this really, the benefit for the housing authority is if we do get a rental on it, we can use that money for our other units, which some of our units date back to like 1950s, you know, Centennial Court. Yeah, I mean, so we're challenged. Maggie does a great job with our small staff that we have trying to manage what we have, but it's a challenge trying to keep these units to, you know, a basic, you know, affordable, you know, well-conditioned housing. So it's a challenge.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Uden. I live at 21 Carmine Avenue in Foxborough. We own our house. We've been here 21 years, and my wife and I have raised our daughters nowhere near this parcel of land.
Okay.
Just a quick bio for context. I've been very active as a volunteer in our community and an elected official, particularly with our school system and other non-denominational organizations. And I'm happy to be here, and I don't want to use the terms we, I like to use the terms us. I also have a positive prejudice towards our Human and Senior Services Center. When I was on the advisory committee, I advocated aggressively for more funding, as we always have to do over the course of the year. Here's the but. I live near a parcel, it's a campground off of Oak Street, which could be subject to these. And right now, admittedly, to everybody and out there in TV land, I'm coming in a little late to the game here. So apologize for any eye-rolling questions I may have. Has this ship sailed?
You know, the answer to that is no.
And I mean that respectfully, Mr. Spear.
I understand. And, you know, we're here listening to what the neighborhood's concerns are. We're making dramatic changes to what we're doing, and we still have hurdles ahead of us.
Agreed.
And I'm telling you right now, we're not sure this will ever get built. You know, if developers don't come forward, there's huge issues with cost of development, if we don't get the signal. So this is not a done deal. We're going to try our damnedest to make this happen, but, you know, it's not a done deal, and that's why we want input from you people. You know, that's why we have a senator that's behind it. We're trying to get the political push to make it happen, but there's no guarantees.
And Mr. Spear, respectfully, I am not coming at you, okay?
I understand.
I'm really not. I'm an us guy, okay?
I'm not
or
taking
the
any of
board
this.
or anybody else with stakeholders in this, particularly my prejudice, again, towards abutters or being a future abutter or something that may cause one to, as they say, raise an eyebrow. My next question is, when, if we don't use this land for even a sunflower field, does this go back to the state? And if this is the case, and I guess I'm asking everybody, I'm looking at Mr. Spear and Mr. Powers, but I'm not pointing to anyone. Does our state and federal government, and maybe even county government, have a Foxborough with its back to the wall, a town that is proud of its community service to each other, its generosity of its philanthropy, its care for one another, and others coming in and going out of the town? But who's steering the ship here long term? And again, I came in late to the game, so I don't know all the answers. I'm in a research thing. I'll thank you for your answers to that and your time, and be following this very closely and listening, but I'm not in an adversarial position here, although I will say, especially as it applies to my very naive understanding of 40B as an individual, I'm very skeptical about what the long-term effects will be on this town for any development of that project. It better not be a Hooters, right? But I'd rather it be a sunflower field.
Well,
okay? And I understand rules are rules and bosses, and we all have bosses, but it seems to me like Foxborough doesn't really have its hand on the tiller. We're sort of subject to, well, the land you own ain't going to be the land you own if you don't do what whoever the we out there in the big world tells us to do. That makes me a little skeptical at this time. Thank you so much for hearing this simple man out. Thank you.
Great. So in responding a little bit to Steve, we're going through the approval process. If for some reason this property does not get approved for this development, the housing authority is done. We'll there's a deed restriction on the land right now that it has to be used for housing, for the housing authority. So if we can't use it for that, then it will go back to DCAM.
When would that be, sir?
I can't tell you. It would be part of, whatever this process goes, if by the, for some reason the zoning board of appeals denies our plan and our financing falls through, we don't have developers, it could be a year or two from now. But I will share with you that the governor and the legislature, housing's a huge concern for the Commonwealth right now.
I know the governor and some of his staff as well.
Yep. Your name, please?
Thomas Rosenberger, 57 North High Street.
Okay.
My question is, and like Steve said, perhaps this ship has sailed, and I know people have said before that single-family housing isn't an option, but what about a construction such as condos? Right, we're talking 50% area median income. Can't you construct affordable condos that can house families in a comfortable and affordable manner that would better fit the culture and construction of this?
So you're different than the rest of the neighborhood here. You're saying family housing, which the last meeting that we had a lot of proponents saying they didn't want family housing. And unfortunately, the Foxborough Housing Authority, we can't sell our properties. In other words, we can do a land lease and stuff, but we can't sell the property. So basically, the deed restriction is for housing, and it would be for rental if the housing authority is part of that.
I think his question is privately owned condos.
Oh, so that's the problem. We can't sell this land to be privately developed to like a for-profit, third-party develop. In other words, we're the housing authority. If we don't develop the property, then it goes back to DCAM. We can't sell it to some developer to say, hey, you come in and you do it. That's part of the deed restriction that's on the parcel. That's how we got it from the state. So it's part of a deed restriction that if we get back to DCAM, they could sell it to a third party and do that. But I don't think they'd be doing that as a surplus property. But I can't speak for them.
Thank you for the answer. I will give the comment that seems rather inefficient and that the market would be better able to handle this property and address the needs of the community. But thank you.
Great. Mr. Weinfeld.
Mr. Spear, so I just want to answer some of Steve's questions because there was a slide there earlier that showed, from, a long time ago through the 2000s and how it wound up in the hands of the housing authority. There's a little dot there and it said submitted to the planning board. So I'm chairman of the planning board. I've been chairman of the selectmen in this town. I'm chairman of the planning board now. I've been on this board for close to 30 years.
Also, your home address?
43 Granite Street,
Thank you.
Foxborough. So one of the things I want to explain is that the planning board, as a body, encouraged the housing authority to pursue this goal because there was a dearth of senior housing available in the town. And a lot of it was really older. Not so much Carl Allen Court, but certainly Centennial Court, some of the individual small homes that we have. And we wanted to see that opportunity happen. When the state has a piece of surplus land like they did here, the first thing they do is they go all over the Commonwealth. They offer to state, stakeholders and say, is anybody interested in this piece of land? If no one comes forward and says, yes, I'm interested, then traditionally they'll go right to the community and ask the government, are they interested? If then no one is interested, they may or may not put it out to private enterprise to purchase and, try to get zoning for however they want to use it. I think it's important that we all recognize the fact that it's not the state that's driving the bus here. It's a local initiative. You know, there's a feeling here that Foxborough could bolster its availability to seniors. At the planning board level, I see it all the time, where they come in and they go, you know, my husband passed away, I've been living in this big house, my children have, live in town, or they've moved away, and I don't have a need for this house, and there's really nowhere in town I can go to. There's no condos being built for seniors specifically, there's not enough senior housing, I've been on the list for 5 years, or 7 years, or 10 years, whatever it might be, and what Mr. Spears said earlier is true. When you're on the list, you're on the state list, so they may wind up going to Newton, or Rentham, or Attleboro, or wherever they can find a senior housing, if it's available. And in order to answer one of John Gray's questions earlier too, that the idea that we theoretically would get sort of a home rule benefit to say, at least in the initial going, up to 70% of those homes might go to local people first, and that we would satisfy a lot of the need in the community. Yes, it doesn't live that way forever. No, unfortunately, it doesn't. The state has certain regulations. The idea here was to be beneficial, not adversarial. The idea here was to try and make this kind of a thing fit. Yes, there was a proposal to put a shopping center up there. There were other proposals, like for instance, where some of the land is in other places in town for other types of housing that got rejected, or for nursing care facilities that got rejected. Today, one of those 40B apartment communities is there. And so that's open to the world at large. It wasn't specific to either seniors or, or so much of a local initiative. It's a rental property. So I think as government bodies, the effort was to do the best we could for the community and provide something. At any time when you have a large piece of land like this that the neighborhood has had the quiet enjoyment of for decades, there's always a question of, well, gee, why does anything have to go there? As Mr. Uden said, gee, I'd rather see a sunflower field there. And there may be other people in this room who feel the same, who feel like, it's woods now, and I'd like it to be woods when my kids grow up, and it stays woods. But I think that there are other people in the community that say, what can we do that's specifically beneficial to the community at large, or at least a segment of the community that has a need? And I think that Mr. Spears is right. They did hear what you were saying earlier on, and I think that discussion and argument was supported by our public safety officials, that a mixed use, family-oriented type of development would not be as appropriate. And they're coming back to you saying, okay, we hear you, we want to do something that's still good for the community, and it's going to be different than what we're all used to, but it's going to be beneficial as well. So I just, want you to feel that it's not the governor's not, yes, has Governor Baker been very vocal about the housing issue? He wants to take some of the federal guideline money that's coming to the state and do community housing in other parts of the state with that money and do other things with it. So he has been a proponent of changing the zoning bylaw regulations in the state from 2/3 majority at a town meeting to a simple majority if you want to change, zoning regulations for different types of uses.
We don't even get that option anymore.
You didn't get that option when they built the other communities in the town either, and they passed. They passed even with a fight. So there were people who went to the ZBA and were against some of the apartment communities that wound up getting, the full zoning for 40B, the Lodge, and the most recent one over by the 99.
Fisher Street.
Yeah, Fisher Street. So,
we went over there and visited over there just to see how that was set up.
right.
Just going in there, you got a bunch of kids and hoodlums just hanging out there ripping butts, and just right off the bat, before you even get in there, and then it's just, the whole thing's a city.
Well, that's a concern, but I don't think you're going to see that here.
Right.
I don't. It's, and listen, can I predict the
Once you get
future?
turnover, you
What's
will.
that?
Once you get turnover, you will.
No, I don't think you will, because it's still going to be restricted to
I work in
seniors.
another town, and I see, and that's what
But
I
is it
see.
restricted to seniors? You just heard Maggie say that the maximum density is 14% across all of the units in the town. for people who are non-elderly disabled. So that's not the same as the lodge, it's not the same as the other property over there, you know, at the 99. So there are certain guidelines that will be in place here that will, I don't want to say prevent, but that will restrict the ability of the type of housing. So, I mean, I hear you, and I understand, and you know, as a major, you know, property owner in this town who deals with all kinds of issues, I get it. And we all want a place that's safe for residents to live in. We all want a town that still continues to support the goals that we want, which is good schools that keep our property values up, that has recreation for our children to live in, you know, that has a safe place for our seniors to live in as well. And even though we all get older and our kids are out of the schools, do our taxes go down because of that? No, because we still got to get the schools going. We still got to pay for those kids to go there. So this is the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, not everyone's going to agree with me, but I see it as a benefit to be taking care of people who lived in this town, who paid their taxes in this town, who grew old in this town, and need a place to live. So that's my speech for tonight.
So one last point that I wanted to let this crowd know that we heard, and we had a real concern at the last meeting, was the fire department had requested to have a substation on the site. And after listening to the neighborhood and the concerns, we told them that is no longer an option on our site. So we've heard you, and I just wanted to read one other thing. I just received earlier today an email from Michael Grace, the police chief. I apologize for the delayed response, and I want to thank the Housing Committee for moving in the direction of an elderly housing project. I can't say enough of the importance of helping our older folks as they are challenged with the cost of living increases on a limited income. The older generation is so special, and hopefully will have a safe and thriving location to reside in this new, wonderful, great community. Thank you, Michael Grace, Police Chief. So we met with them. We heard their concerns, and to be truthful with you, we were not aware of the amount of issues that are taking place for the other 240B projects, but they said, which was so interesting, that they still go to the Foxborough Housing Authority, you know, developments daily. However, it's a different need that's there. It's mostly, you know, going for, you know, emergency services, you know, ambulance, you know, transports. Do we still have some police issues? Every once in a while we do. You know, we're a society of things, but we try our best. We put up security cameras, you know, in our developments, and that dramatically has helped, you know, with some of the drug addiction problems that are going on. So it's not like we haven't listened to you people. We're listening and trying to make the proper, you know, choices here with this development. With that.
Hi, my name is Natalie Prosser. I live at 58 North High Street. Excuse me. I just wanted to ask, because he brought up the fact that, you know, we have seniors that are, you know, my husband passed away, now my kids are gone. If I sell my house with the cost of housing now, does that mean if I get a good price for my house, I'm not going to be eligible for this low income?
Natalie, I don't know exactly what your income level is, but you know, I think there's also, if you have a fair amount of equity in your house, that's probably going to prevent you from being able to qualify for this development.
Well, I was just asking that with the fact that, you know, that it was brought up that we have a lot of people that are now elderly and now are looking for the housing, but if they are selling their house and they're coming and asking, you know, you like, how can I get housing? Is it Foxborough residents that are going to be the ones that, you know, can get that? Or because of the fact that I owned a house and I sell it, now I'm not eligible,
So,
I guess is my question.
I think, well, your two two tiers. One is, I believe, your income, and I don't want to get into the details, but if you have a fair amount of equity in your house, you're probably not going to qualify.
Okay.
There is a new development that just got proposed a week ago. That's a smaller, one bedroom or two bedrooms that was developed, that's being proposed off of Moore Street. That is a similar, it's not an elderly part of it,
Right.
but you might be
Well,
able
I
to.
was just asking about the elderly, because they're bringing up that, we have
Can I
need
chime in
for-
on this? Because this is we've been doing this conversation on housing for a couple
Right.
years now.
Right.
And absolutely, you're identifying one of the needs. So we have two different kinds of needs. We have the housing authority need, which is the folks that truly do need, financial assistance. It is, as Mr. Gray pointed out, it's a subsidy. We all, state, federal, local level, are subsidizing to allow our this population to have help in their housing thing. Then there's the group that sounds like with you, if you own a home, not knowing your specifics, chances are if you have assets, you're not going to be eligible for the affordable, low income or whatever as people call it. That's another whole need, and that's not for tonight, but Kevin will roll his eyes and everybody will roll, because I talk about this all the time, but this is a problem with our suburbs, and trust me, I live in a suburb. I live on almost an acre lot. I get it, and but like when you have 1 acre zoning, no one can build homes. Like you probably, like me, when I sell my home, I want to move into a 1,000, 1,100 square foot house. Nothing major, 2 bedrooms, maybe one. You can't build them out here now. With 1 acre zoning, the lots are 250 to 300,000 per lot, and then you have to build a house. Typically, the formula is, I think it's
3 to 1.
3 to 1. So if you're at 250, you're at 750. You need to sell your house. That's what we're seeing out here. Now we all moved out here because we don't want the density of the city, but that's our balancing act. Is someone said we should let the market. The younger gentleman then said we should let the market do it. The market is not doing it. For example, we have a subdivision in town that was developed in 2019, a modest subdivision. It started out at the price point of, I think, $500,000, $525,000 for these small starter sort of homes. I just talked to the builder. I asked him to do an apples and apples comparison. $725,000. So in 2 years, this non-affordable, but just through the market, it's gone up $200,000. So we have a big problem. I don't have the answer. There is a 40B that's being proposed on Moore Street. I don't know if it will be supported. I don't know if the selectmen are being asked to support it. I don't know if they feel comfortable doing that yet. We'll see. The meeting is Tuesday night. And then it has to go to the state, and then it has to go to the zoning board. So we'll see. But those are the type of units that he's proposing that they would be about 1,400 square feet, and it would be about 500,000. Like me.
I was just asking.
Okay.
So,
No, but I think this is an important conversation for this
who
community
would
to understand.
qualify, I
is
guess,
This
for-
housing authority project is not going to meet the needs of the average homeowner.
Okay.
It is going to help the needs of those that don't
that are on
have.
waiting lists now.
Or
Okay.
just, might not have, again, they might not own a home, they might rent, and they have on one income, and now they're down to one Social Security. A lot of things have happened where they might have sold their home 10 years ago, and then their spouse passes, and, there's a lot of circumstances that happen, but we've always said, Walnut Street is not going to solve all of the housing problems here. We have another housing problem for those people, I don't live in town, but those of us who have single-family homes that can't afford to go anywhere.
Right.
Because we're going to sell our houses and we're going to spend even more to move into a smaller home.
Right.
Paige?
Okay.
You had asked about the levels. So we talked about the income levels in May, and that's in the presentation. We did not talk about the capital. So I can do a little research and pass some information on to Paige. Maybe we can put it on the website that has the capital requirements as well. And that might answer your sort of more general question
Yeah.
about
I was just
who can afford
wondering
what.
if,
Yeah.
it's the Foxborough people are going to be the ones that, but if I'm not saying for me personally, but
Exactly.
if it was like I were to sell my house, but then I wouldn't really qualify probably because of the fact that, okay.
And there's probably others who are in that same, so it's a completely valid question. We'll find out the capital requirements and put those up as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Charles DePompo, and I live at 96 Main Street. First, I'd like to compliment everybody on this really important issue and the give and take that's gone back and all the information that's been presented. The question that and I'd particularly like to thank Emily for her presentation, is very thorough, very precise. The question that I have, and I don't think it's been raised yet, is that the land the state had it back in the 1980s. And then, the chart was where it went from the 1980s forward. My question is, what has this land been used for from 1980 for the previous 200 years? Because I don't want to see any surprises come up 2 or 3 years from now that maybe the state used it for X or Y or Z. And I don't know who has the information on the land itself at the state level, but I think it's important to find out the history of that parcel, what it was used for, what it was not used for, and if that poses any impediments to the development of the parcel. Thank you.
For that question.
Do you want to talk about the facilities assessment?
Yeah, so that's a really valid point, but we did have, I believe it was in 2013,
Yes.
a feasibility study was done through a grant, and Bay Colony was hired, so I believe they looked at all that. There was this full due diligence done on the site before the Housing Authority wanted to take the property, because to that thinking, they didn't want to take on something and own it. Greg, is that what your recollection is?
Yeah, and I believe this was surplus land for when 140 and the whole highway system 95, the interchange. I think this was surplus land that they had that never got developed. So I believe that that's where this land came from. To the best of my knowledge, any of the stuff I've seen, there's never been anything developed on the site. So it was a leftover parcel. I see an older gentleman shaking his head, and for some of us who have been around long enough, I remember when the highway went through in 140, but this is surplus land from the development of the highway. Yes.
Hi.
Good
My
morning,
name
good
is
afternoon, or good evening, whatever it is.
My name is Sue Ellen Rosenberger, and I'm at 57 North High.
Speak up.
No.
Sue Ellen, and what was your last name?
Rosenberger.
Rosenberger.
Yes.
Was that your
And-
husband that spoke?
No, my son.
Your son, okay.
Yes.
In 57 North High?
Yes.
Yes.
And my biggest concern, besides just the whole project,
Yeah.
is the height of the buildings and the density of them. No one's addressed that I've heard. I wasn't able to go to the first meeting because I had to work that night. But I heard they could be up to 4 stories high, and I just can't even imagine looking out my front door and seeing this towering buildings and lighting, beyond the
I
trees. And
can't-
so is there a cap on the height? Is that something we could put into the proposals, or?
I don't, go ahead.
Yeah, so for those that did attend the May meeting, I showed developments of all different sizes and scales, because one of the things that we wanted to talk about were what were people's preferences for the sizes and scales. The reason we didn't talk about it tonight is that's, again, one of the things we won't know until we start to get the development proposals. And it will very much depend on how they choose to structure it. They may choose smaller but more buildings. They may choose one higher building.
We could put, some of the things you said are going to be required that they have to, is it something that we could put in there, not higher than 2.5 stories or something?
We could talk about, yeah.
That's really, would be very upsetting to me. It would change the whole way the neighborhood looked. I feel like I would have to sell my house immediately if they were going to put a 3 or 4 story building there.
Well, don't do that, because there's a long way from the proposals to the end.
No, but if that proposal went through and it
Yes,
was that
exactly.
I don't think I could live there. I think it would just ruin the whole entire
So there's-
character of the neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go in there, and you're not the first person who is concerned about height in relationship to their single-family home. So a couple of things that go in. One is, how is that buffer designed, right? How many trees, how deep it is, because part of that would, if you're here and you've got a buffer of trees, this wide, you might have 4 stories and not be able to see it because of the trees.
I don't believe that that's possible. Unless the
Understood.
trees were very, very large buffer, but there's not that much land there.
All right, so a couple of things on that. One of the things that we're requiring is that they show us a series of renderings. And there's a minimum of 3 that are required. One is from within the site, so we can see what the buildings look like together, or building, because it could be single. One is from Walnut Street, and one, we are requiring a rendering from North High Street, so we can see how it would look. So that's part of it, so we'd at least know that. Second is, yes, you could potentially restrict the height. You might restrict the number of responses that you get, and that's problematic. And so we've tried to be flexible about what we've asked for so we can get the maximum number of responses to get the best choice for projects. The third thing is there's something called a 40B design handbook, and it's something that DHCD did for developers considering 40B that talks about how the buildings have to relate to the existing environment. And in your case, the existing environment is single-family homes. So that's something else that comes in. We deliberately didn't, didn't put in too many restrictions on height or depth or number of buildings because we've seen, and one of the things that we showed in May was this wide variety. Everything from your 4 stories to 2.5 or 3 stories to developments that look more like single-family homes, but may be duplexes or even 4 homes, but designed as a single-family building. Again, we don't know what the market's going to do, so we've left that flexibility. But what we can do is increase that advantageous and highly advantageous criteria to talk about exactly what you're talking about. And I can think of some language around that.
That would be wonderful, because that's a
Yeah.
huge concern I have. And I think when my son asked about the condos, like he was just referring like just to the type of building there rather than some huge 4-story apartment building, maybe have something that more fits into the character of the neighborhood and really isn't an eyesore and isn't something that is going to be, change our property values and change our quality of life and our, we're used to looking at the woods.
Exactly.
And I don't want to look at some huge tall building and a bunch of lights. I mean, that would be awful to me.
And frankly, that wouldn't even make it to less advantageous in the way that we're structuring it, because nobody wants that. The FHA has been very clear that they want a high quality of architectural design. We also want the same for the site. We do want that to be a significant, a row of trees is not considered a significant buffer. But yes, I can go back, we can discuss the language again tomorrow and strengthen that.
I would appreciate that. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. John Latanzio, 7 Walnut Street. And I had 2 questions. One regarding the site selection. I haven't heard anything about the property on Walnut Street across Route 140, adjacent to Walnut Terrace, all the way up to Norcap,
Yes,
between Walnut and the highway.
yes.
Is that under town control, and has that site been considered? And if not, why not?
He's talking the opposite, across the street from the community.
Hang on, I'm just going to bring up the context
Especially,
map. Is it?
added fact that there's news that Norcap Lodge may be decommissioned, and I don't know what the plans for that property will be.
Is it shown, is the property you're talking about
Yes.
shown on that map?
Well, I'm not sure if I can read it.
So the Walnut Street is in the property we're talking about is with that blue boundary around it.
Walnut Terrace property, isn't that
That
Foxborough
one.
Housing?
That is Foxborough Housing. So, but I
There's
believe,
property adjacent to that, all the way up to Norcap Lodge, between Walnut Street and Route 95. A significant acreage, and I haven't heard that mentioned at all as a possible site. I'm wondering why not.
I believe the property that the FHA owns, we developed that to its maximum potential. In other words, I don't think we have more room to develop
Not
any
enough room?
housing on that.
All right.
Because there's wetlands there, and we have a huge septic system that's there. I have heard some grumblings about the land for Norcap, that there's a possibility that gets decommissioned. The other side of Walnut Street is the land that's been protected by conservation,
Near the pond, right.
near the opposite side. So that is where they farm it occasionally.
No, I'm not mentioning, that's not the property I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Okay.
the other side of Route 140.
The other side of Route 140.
We can look into it. I mean, the reason is that, the Housing Authority was
We own
given
this
this land for affordable housing, so I think we can look into what is owned, but
So you want to
The
see
focus
additional
of-
development
yeah.
the
there.
focus of this is,
I just want to know why that property wasn't under consideration. The second question was regarding traffic.
Yes,
Anybody who lives in this neighborhood or lives in South Foxborough is fully aware of how dangerous that intersection is,
yes.
regardless of whether this project goes through or not. That has to be addressed with a signal and not a barrier.
So,
Because in my estimation, a barrier is not going to be a realistic solution because it's going to reroute all that Walnut Street traffic downtown or someplace else where it's going to become a problem?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Thank you.
Because the signalization is tied to this development. In other words, if this site doesn't get developed, that signal's not going to get put there.
Why
And
is that? I feel like we're being held hostage to this project to
Because
get an improvement.
Because the Mass Highway has said, simple way to resolve the issue of the amount of significant accidents at that intersection is bring the Jersey barrier down. That solves it. It creates a neighborhood issue, but it eliminates the traffic, it eliminates the accidents from that intersection, which is all they care about. The signalization of that is a complicated signal because it also, there's concerns from Mass Highway, is when people are coming off the exit ramp, they're going to be right there. So it requires some type of signalization, which we've seen now where it says traffic signal ahead, so that this is not an easy traffic light situation. So that's what we've been told from Mass Highway is eventually, because of the amount of accidents there, that the easiest solution is to put a Jersey barrier down.
And if I may,
If you do that, you're going to have to make Walnut Street one-way onto Route 140.
Then that's, or it'd be a right-hand turn only,
Or both.
or both. So, but I'm not speaking for Mass Highway, I'm just telling you that if that happens, there isn't, the money won't become available for Mass Highway in the grants that we have for signalization.
and if I can just address it, this signal has not been on MassDOT's radar at all. They don't, not that, I don't want to say they don't care, but there are so many intersections throughout the state that they worry about. This is not high on their list. The only reason we are getting consideration right now is because we applied under the Housing Choice Grant. So it really is tied to this project in the sense that they are supporting housing, and we were able to say, so, even if this project doesn't get built, I'm actually hoping we get a signal. So, it's a fine timing, but I don't think that's going to...
That may be, but...
But if I may finish, is that this has been done solely as a result of it. It was a $200,000 design. This was never going to happen without this happening. So you can kind of blame us / because we, by working with the Housing Authority to move this forward, it created this condition. We're close to getting signalized. If it wasn't for this project would not be on the map. There were no design plans. We did those design plans in the past year. So that's why this is on the table. It has never been a worry of MassDOT.
Well, that may be, but the signal is a bigger priority for the people in this neighborhood and a lot of the people in Foxborough than the project is.
No, and I will share with you one of the things, before we even were talking about the signal, I said, why couldn't you put a rotary right at Central Street and 140? In other words, right near Papagino's, and that would be a way to reverse the traffic and go around. So maybe that's a cost alternative, but I'll share with you the signal isn't going to happen if this development doesn't happen.
Okay, thank you.
What happens to the $2 million that's been appropriated by Upper Cost? Where does that go?
Back to the government.
Back to the government.
Back where?
Back to the government.
Back to the government. It won't happen.
Government?
It won't happen. So I'm being honest with you here. So this is, where we're trying to have, all the political clout we can get to try to make this happen. So if it doesn't, it's kind of it's all dependent, it's all tied together. So if this doesn't happen, that signal's not going to happen.
And we do understand your frustration. I mean, we all kind of laugh because here we are gaming the system, not really, but getting all these grants to try to do it. It's their intersection. It's their highway, so it's kind of like we're getting one over on them by making them pay for it. But in reality, who's the joke on? But I mean, it's their intersection, it's their thing, but we all see the intersections throughout the state. And then just because you have a dangerous one doesn't mean you're at the top of the list. If you don't have plans to do it, you can't even get on a list. So we're not on a list right now. We are actually, that's why I think this Auchincloss money will help us, because we're technically not on a list. But I think when you start looking at $2 million and they go, well, this is our problem, and it is housing, we actually might stand a chance. But there is no guarantee. Like Greg said, if we don't get funding and if this signal doesn't happen, this project will not happen. So it's like, without the signal, there will be no project. Without the project, there will be no signal. So it's kind of...
We call it the carrot and stick. So that's kind of,
We're stuck. We wish we could build you an intersection with town funds. It's just not, we wouldn't even be allowed to do it, actually.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jack Holland. I live at 8 Walnut Street. I've lived there for over 48 years. And I came here tonight just to find out exactly what it is you're going to put in the RFP. Primarily because I don't want to see a lodge. I don't want to see the preserve that's up in Walpole with all these problems that they have. We don't want that in the neighborhood. And now I'm hearing that you're looking at elderly housing. That's great. But people in the town, like myself, I'm elderly. People like myself should have an opportunity, a first opportunity for that housing if it becomes available, if in fact it ever gets built. But that's why I came here tonight, because I don't want to see another lodge, another preserve, not in this neighborhood. We've taken care of our property. All our neighbors here have taken care of our property for many, many years. And we enjoy Foxborough. We like where we are. We don't want to see it ruined. It's that simple.
And we've heard you. You know,
obviously you did, and that's
we heard
good.
you. So I mean, this is part of the process. After meeting with the fire chief and police chief, the neighborhood, we've heard you. So that's why we shifted gears. We also got rid of the fire station that's there. That's a big. These are big issues that we've heard you. We're trying the best we can, and now we feel there's a huge, demand, and there's a need for senior housing, and we see it. Maggie tells you. I hear stories all the time. People call me probably 5 times a year. Can you get me up on the list? My son's disabled. So we're trying to work with that. We have another parcel that we've been working almost 10 years on, and it just happened 2 weeks ago off of Market Street. We had a piece of crap house that we tied in with the help of the planning board for the development that's going on with the fire station, and we traded it for a parcel on Centennial that the town took. So we're trying to do possibly veteran housing there. So we're trying, but this is, we've heard you. We think this is the right avenue to go. And, I know we're not going to keep you all happy, but sometimes that I heard a little bit, the devil is probably better than something else that could happen with DCAM.
I also would have a question about, is there a handout we can get of tonight's presentation?
Yeah, we can make that
I
available.
noticed there's a woman with a handout, so I just figured there must be handouts somewhere. So, how do you get them?
So Paige, we can
very
put.
much.
We'll put it up on the website.
We can put it up on the web.
I might need like a day just because I don't know how to do it myself. I need someone else to do it for me, but we'll get it up there.
We can do it.
And if you want to email me, if you go to the planning board's website and you click on my name, you can email me and I'll email it to you directly. But to get it on the general website, I just need a little technical help for that.
Back again.
Does the Housing Authority have any resources where maybe we could set up a workshop to help seniors, to guide them into a situation where they could sell their houses and manipulate their money in such a way as to maybe they could qualify?
I think that's out of the purview of the Housing Authority.
I didn't know if you had people like that.
I think we can maybe put people in touch with that, Maggie.
Because I think some people can do that.
I think they can. But that's something that I think
One of the things I want to make clear for the state.
Can you come up? Sorry, can you come up to the
come on
thing?
up, Maggie.
You're going to say something important. I know everybody wants to hear it.
For the state waiting list, and this is not how this development will be done from a state waiting list, it goes by your income, not your assets. So in answer to your question, you could sell your home, you could have money in the bank, but your income is either your Social Security, your pension, or maybe you're employed. Okay. That is how you qualify by your income. Your asset is not a deficit to you at all. There's a difference there, and then people get confused. You worry, just like you said, you worry about selling your house. Oh my God, now I have $500,000. I won't qualify for housing. You are qualified by your income only. Okay?
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie. Hey, we learn something new every day. We need Maggie to run a seminar.
I guess so. Was there gentleman in the back there that's standing? Did you want to speak? No? Okay. Anyone else? Second time around for anyone else? All right. At this time, I guess we'll adjourn the meeting. Prior to adjourning, we'll be putting up our revised RFP, and that can be on the planning board's website as well as, Maggie, do we have an active website that we can post this on?
We do have a town website, but I'd have to have Christine put it on for me.
Yeah, see, none of us know what we're doing on this technology, but we'll figure it out.
We'll have just so you all know, we'll have the revised RFP after tonight's meeting and tomorrow's discussion. We'll probably have that sometime late next week or the beginning of the following week,
And you can
so.
call the Housing Authority office, we'll run up some copies and mail them to you, give us your address.
Yeah, once that's ready.
Or planning, email planning, and we'll get you what we have. But again, the presentation will be available, and we can email that right out. The RFP won't be done for another week or so.
A little over a week.
We're not quite done that yet. And then anything that happens on the RFP, once sadly, Emily's going to be done, and although we are applying for another grant. But so then it's going to be in the hands of the Housing Authority, and they have all of the meetings are public, so any discussion moving forward. We do have a new procurement officer, my understanding, is starting for the town. A position was, just in case anybody's worried, one position was eliminated and 2 were created. So we now have a procurement specialist starting, which is a great help for people like me who don't really know what they're doing on RFPs sometimes. But they'll be able to help us. And then we are hoping to get some additional technical support for once the RFP's out to help us sort of the reviewing and the criteria. So we have a lot more work to do, and we do have a learning curve. We've never done this. So we are all learning together, and but we're trying to do our very best on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
Was Ed Galley, 56 North High Street?
Just say it again to the microphone for the people.
Ed Galley, 56 North High Street.
Yes.
Where's conservation in all this?
They will have to review and approve the plans. We don't have a plan yet, so
No input on just the way the property is right now?
No,
as
no.
far as
Well, I mean,
migration or any of that stuff?
We did, as part of the Bay Colony feasibility study, they have flagged the wetlands.
They have?
That
Okay.
the wetlands have been flagged and certified. So we know as we go forward, that will be part of our RFP. We'll have a plot plan. There's been a survey done on it, so we do have, the wetlands are all marked, and we've actually cleared through natural heritage as well.
So if you plan to build, say you build 240 units, and we talked back in March, you said you'd make a path for the migration that's there. How do they adapt to that? They have a path of where they're already going, and you build that many buildings, there's nowhere for them to go. I mean, there's a lot of animals back there. I can shine a flashlight in my backyard, and all I see is eyes.
So that's part of the habitat, part of when we do our RFP, that they'll have to, take that into account. We have some verbiage that's in the RFP.
we do.
That's specific
I
to.
can't see that happening. There's a lot of animals back there, and if you're putting that many units back there, there's no way.
Well, I think with the nat.
Because they come through and they migrate to everybody's yard, and they all go to the golf course, and then if people start putting up fences and stuff like that too, that's gonna be a detriment to the animals as well.
We heard at the May meeting, there was somebody, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, because I can't remember, but did mention the idea of having wildlife corridors, and I think that was also part of they didn't want a fence up around the property. So as we think about that woodland buffer, I did put in that into the draft that the community is concerned about ensuring that wildlife still have access, and so that we would expect that the design of the buffers would, they would be contiguous. The one on Walnut Street, the one between the development and the houses on North High would be contiguous, and they would also be contiguous to other areas that would allow for wildlife movement, and that needs to be part of their site design.
So that just gives them a road to go down, and that's it?
It at least gives them a road.
Habitat.
It's taking away some of the habitat. It would depend on how big those buffers are. There was a little bit of a difference in the feasibility study. One source says there's about 16 acres. One source says there's about 15 acres. I don't remember where the survey ended up between that, but I remember they called it out.
15.96 or something.
Something like that. It was like 1602 versus 15.96. So, they have some room, but, there are the wetlands, there are the requirements of the buffers, so they're going to need to be a little bit creative to make sure that this
Be on the other
works.
side of that, where our backyards could also become the habitat for all these animals as well.
Although they will want to stay away from humans, so there is that too.
Right.
So, yeah. But thank you for that.
Thanks. All right. So with that being said, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Appreciate it. And all those who are on Zoom, thank you.